Welcome back. In today's video, we're going to talk about having cool animal spirit companions, specifically through a spell known as Find Familiar. If you love having cute little animals around you, well, sometimes cute, that you can also take control of and do all sorts of creative things, then this video is for you. Find Familiar has been confirmed to be in Baldur's Gate 3, and I will reference a Baldur's Gate 3 example that we got to see, but some of this video will also be speculation and just relating back to D&D 5e because we didn't get a full presentation on it. Before we get started, I want to give a special thank you to a recent patron, Jay. Jay, thank you so much. I really appreciate your support. If you guys end up enjoying this video, please subscribe. We have much more Baldur's Gate 3 content on the way. Links to the Wolf Apparel merch store, as well as my Twitter and my Discord server will be below. Let's talk Find Familiar. Find Familiar is a level 1 conjuration spell, and it reads as: you gain the service of a familiar, a spirit that takes an animal form you choose: cat, crab, frog, rat, raven, or spider. A familiar can't attack, but it can take other actions as normal. When you cast a spell with a range of touch, your familiar can deliver the spells as if it had cast the spell. Your familiar must be within 30 meters of you, and it must use its reaction to deliver the spell when you cast it. If the spell requires an attack roll, you use your attack modifier for the roll. Let's break this down so you understand everything. You gain the service of a familiar, which is not an actual real animal, but instead a spirit that takes the form of a specific animal that you choose. In the game, the choices for your familiar's forms that we saw was cat, crab, frog, rat, raven, and spider. But note there were missing slots, and this is also early access, so I'm guessing we will have a larger list of forms to choose from later in the game's development. Some of these added forms might include bat, frog, owl, octopus, lizard, snake, fish, hawk, seahorse, and weasel. And who knows, maybe Larian will include some of their own familiars that are not actually in D&D 5e. When you choose your familiar's form, it will take on the statistics and the features of the related animal that it has formed into. For example, in the gameplay we watched as the player chose the spider form. And when in this form, you had some spider-specific features, such as a special jump, and also a poisonous bite. Spiders will also likely be able to climb up the sides of walls. If you use the raven, your familiar can fly, and you also might gain a feature that allows your raven to mimic sounds that it has heard. As a cat, you'll have bonuses to stealth and perception, and also be able to perceive smells better than some other creatures. Each form will offer its own different features, and it's up to you to be creative in taking advantage of them. It'll be a lot of fun to see how far Larian actually takes this. Your familiar being an arcane spirit and not a real breathing animal allows for things such as you changing your familiar's shape. If you summon your familiar as a cat to eavesdrop on some conversations, but you then decide you want to get a bird's eye view of the street, you will likely be able to cast the Find Familiar spell again and choose the raven, and your cat will change into a raven. Also, knowing that it is in fact a spirit and not a living, bleeding, breathing animal might allow you as a player to try some more risky, dangerous activities with your familiar, and not feel as bad if something goes wrong. One of the really cool things about familiars is that you can telepathically communicate with them and they will obey your commands. And an even cooler thing is that you have the option of taking control of your familiar and seeing through their eyes and hearing what they hear. In Baldur's Gate 3, it looks as simple as just selecting your familiar instead of your character. In the gameplay, we watched as the player took control of a spider, used the spider's special jump, and also scouted ahead and bit Shadowheart in the leg. As far as how far can you go with your familiar, right now it seems like Larian is attempting to not put much of a limit on this. Sven said that in an attempt to break the game, he decided to cast Find Familiar and become a spider, and he then went on to take that spider across to the other side of the world. And the crazy thing is, he said it pretty much worked and didn't actually break the game. This is crazy to think about, but really cool. There will of course be some limitations. As mentioned, they said spiders cannot open doors, and I'm sure many areas will be blocked in some way, shape, or form, so the player can't just see the entire game. But as of now, it seems like Larian is allowing you to go very far with the exploration aspects with your familiar. So like I said, when you choose your familiar takes on the statistics and the features of that specific creature. This makes familiars excellent for so many utility-based situations. Be creative. Use your familiar to eavesdrop on conversations, or use a water animal familiar to pick up something deep down in the depths of the blue. Or maybe use your familiar to scout out a dungeon. A bat would be a great choice, for it has blind sight and can see invisible enemies. What if you're trapped in a prison cell? Maybe a certain familiar form can help you out. As Sven said, use your cat to distract some enemies as your rogue easily sneaks by. The possibilities are endless, and it's really up to you to see what the game will actually allow you to do. So what about in combat? What can your familiar actually do? In combat, a familiar will roll its own initiative and act on its own turn. They can't use the attack action, but they can take other actions as normal, such as help or dash or disengage. Keep in mind that familiars typically only have one hit point, so they will die or disappear in one hit. They are not tanks or frontline fighters. Familiars need to be used carefully in combat. One of the best ways to use a familiar in a combat situation is by having them use the help action, which will grant another creature advantage on an attack roll made against a creature adjacent to that familiar. Think of it like this: your familiar disrupts an enemy by flying around its face or running between its legs, and this allows you or another party member that is close to that enemy creature to strike at them with advantage, which greatly increases the chances of a successful strike. So your familiar can't use the attack action, but being able to use the help action kind of makes up for this in its own way. Having only 1 HP, it's definitely possible that the enemy might use their turn to easily get rid of your familiar. Although this is kind of sad, that enemy just used up his action on your tiny little weak familiar instead of using it on you or a party member. You can always summon the familiar back on your turn or after the fight. This can definitely be a situation that helps you win the fight even though your familiar got whacked. There's also another really cool way to use your familiar in combat. Your familiar can actually deliver a touch spell for you. When you cast a spell that has a range of touch, you can deliver that spell through your familiar by spending your familiar's reaction. So if your familiar is close to an enemy and you're keeping your distance, cast a spell that has a range of touch and deliver it through your familiar. Of course, this requires your familiar to once again get close to an enemy, but many times it's worth it. A safer way for using touch spells through your familiar is by doing more support type spells, such as buffs for your party members. This way your familiar is close to your party members as opposed to being in an enemy's face. You might use Cure Wounds, which is a spell with the range of touch, and cast it through your cat, which might be next to the party member that needs a heal. This way you can stay safely back and still get off a spell that requires you to be close to someone. It's also possible that familiars might be able to use magic items, which is how it works in Dungeons & Dragons, and this can offer its own set of possibilities. So if you like the idea of having a little familiar with you, let's talk about how you can go about acquiring this spell. The first, most obvious and easiest way is by playing as a wizard. As a wizard, right away at level 1, you gain a spellbook with 6 first level spells of your choice from the wizard's spell list. Simply choose Find Familiar as one of these 6 first level spells. Since not everyone wants to play as a wizard, there will be other options to gain this spell. You could play as a warlock, and when you reach level 3 and get to choose a pact boon, choose the Pact of the Chain and you get the Find Familiar spell. Find Familiar for the Warlock has an added Warlock touch to the spell, which expands the list of forms your familiar can take. Your familiar can now also be an imp, pseudo-dragon, quasit, or sprite. This is a cool way to gain Find Familiar, but in the Warlock style. It's also possible that you might be able to gain Find Familiar as a Pact of the Tome Warlock, who takes the Book of the Ancients invocation. If you don't want to be a wizard or a warlock, you could also be a College of Lore bard, for at level 6 you get additional magical secrets, which lets you learn 2 spells of your choice from any class. Rogues that become arcane tricksters and fighters that become eldritch knights can also get Find Familiar, for those subclasses deal with the wizard's spell list. From watching the recent Panel from Hell live show, we've also learned that you'll be able to get Find Familiar by playing as a ranger. Sven said, and this is a quote, "I picked the ranger, so I had a class passive that I had to select, so I picked Beast Taming because I read that it was going to give me a cantrip which allows me to find a familiar." When he said this, I was confused because he said a lot of things that don't really follow D&D 5e. But what I am gathering from this, and feel free to put your opinions below, and thanks to those on my Discord who offered their insight, is that choosing the Ranger in Baldur's Gate 3 will allow you to get the Find Familiar spell as a cantrip, which is a spell that does not require spell slots to use. This is obviously a modified version of the Ranger class, which Larian did say before that they would be modifying the Ranger. This could be for the Ranger subclass of Beastmaster only, or maybe it's for the Ranger in general. Either way, this seems to be another way you can get this fun spell. Of course, don't forget that if you become a Beastmaster Ranger at level 3, you'll also get a Beast Companion, which will be a real animal companion. If none of those class options that I just mentioned sound appealing to you, there are still ways for characters to gain Find Familiar, and that is through the Magic Initiate feat, or the Ritual Caster feat, but we're not sure if either of these feats will even be in the game or not. If they are in the game, you can acquire one of these feats by either playing as a variant human, which if that race is in the game, it will give you a choice of a feat at character creation. Or you can forego an ability score improvement that most classes get at levels 4 and 8 and instead take a feat. So that's it for today's video. I have many more animal focused videos planned for the future. I just didn't want to put them all into this video because it would have been a 30 or 40 minute video. I don't got time to edit that tonight, but we'll have some more future videos for sure on animal stuff. Thanks so much for watching, guys. If you guys enjoyed the video, please like. Oh, wait. One more thing. Find Familiar can also be cast as a ritual in many cases, but we don't want to talk about, or I don't want to talk about ritual spells that much right now because we haven't seen it really in Baldur's Gate 3. Just keep that in mind. Those of you who play D&D, you know what a ritual spell is, but everybody else, just consider Find Familiar as a regular spell, and we'll figure it out as it goes. Thanks so much for watching, guys. If you guys enjoyed the video, please like, comment, and subscribe. I really appreciate it. It's a huge help to my videos. I do all sorts of content on this channel, ranging from live videos to game reviews to game tutorials to lore videos to class guides and much more. I'd love to have some of you guys back on a future video. Until next time.